In spring of youth it was my lot to haunt of the wide world a spot, the which I could not love the less. So lovely was the loneliness of a wild lake with black rock bound, and the tall pines that towered around. But when the night had thrown her pall upon that spot as upon all, and the mystic wind went by, murmuring in melody, then that I would awake to the terror of the lone lake. Yet that terror was not fright, but a tremulous delight, a feeling not the jeweled mind could teach or bribe me to define, nor love, although the love were thine. Death was in that poisonous wave, and in its gulf a fitting grave, for him who thence could solace bring to his lone imagining, whose solitary soul could make an Eden of that dim lake.
His baptismal name was Aegeus. That of his family I will not mention. The recollections of his earliest years are connected with the library and with its volumes, of which latter I will say no more. Here died his mother. Herein was he born. Berenice and he were cousins, and they grew up together in his paternal halls. Yet differently they grew. He ill of health and buried in gloom. She agile, graceful, there was flowing with energy. He living within his own heart and addicted body and soul to the most intense and painful meditation. She roaming carelessly through life with no thought of shadows in her path or the silent flight of the raven-winged hours. Vividly is her image before him now, as in the early days of her lightheartedness and joy. Disease, a fatal disease, swept over her.
During the brightest days of her unparalleled beauty, most surely he had never loved her. Yet bitterly lamenting her fallen and desolate condition, he spoke to her of marriage. And at length the period of their nuptials was approaching, when upon an afternoon in the winter of the year, he sat alone in the inner apartment of the library. But uplifting his eyes, Berenice stood before him. She spoke no word, and he, not for worlds, could have uttered a syllable. His burning glances at length fell upon her face. Her once golden hair overshadowed the hollow temples with ringlets now black as the raven's wing. The eyes were lifeless, lusterless, and her lips parted. The teeth of the changed Berenice disclosed themselves to his view. The shutting of a door disturbed him, and looking up he found his cousin had departed from the chamber. But alas, the white and ghastly spectrum of the teeth! The teeth! They were here, and there, and everywhere. He had no thoughts but for the teeth. All other matters and all different interests became absorbed in their single contemplation. They were alone present to the mental eye, and became the essence of his mental life. Then broke in upon his dreams a wild cry as of horror and dismay. Throwing open one of the doors of the library, in rushed a servant maiden who told him that Berenice was no more. She had fallen dead in the early morning, and all the preparations for the burial were complete. He would have given worlds to escape, but he had no longer the power to move, and remained rooted to the spot, gazing upon the frightful length of the rigid body. God of heaven, was it indeed the finger of the enshrouded dead that stirred? Once again there glared upon him in too palpable reality the glistening and ghastly teeth of Berenice. He found himself again sitting in the library, and again sitting there alone. It seemed that he had newly awakened from a confused and exciting dream. The spirit of a departed sound, the shrill and piercing shriek of a female voice seemed to be ringing in his ears. He had done a deed. What was it? On the table beside him lay a little black box of ebony. It was a box of no remarkable character, and he had seen it frequently before. But how came it there upon his table, and why did he shudder in regarding it? He pointed to his garments. They were muddy and clotted with gore. The menial took him by the hand, but it was indented with the impress of human nails. The menial directed his attention to some object against the wall. It was a spade. With a shriek he bounded to the table and grasped the ebony box, but in his tremor it slipped from out his hands and burst. And from it, with a rattling sound, there rolled out some instruments of dental surgery, intermingled with the many white and glistening substances that were scattered to and fro about the floor.